自2025年10月15日的新闻：美国和阿拉伯世界如何联手促成加沙协议。A big day how the US and Arab world teamed up to seal the Gaza deal. The Egyptian intelligence chief was briefing a room full of negotiators on the state of play in the Gaza Strip ceasefire talks when the Prime Minister of Qatar quietly slipped a handwritten note to Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. The note urged the two Americans to push the Israelis to compromise. It was the morning of Wednesday, October 8. Kushner, President Donald Trump's son-in-law, and Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, had just arrived on a private plane in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for what they hoped would be a breakthrough at last in the negotiations to bring an eventual end to Israel's 2 years war with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They had reason to be optimistic. For the first time, Hamas had signed its readiness to release all the Israeli hostages without a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces, and as long as it received assurance that Israel would not return to war, giving up the hostages could deprive Israel of a reason to carry on the war, and Israel was ready to free thousands of Palestinians from its prison, including 250 serving life sentences. But the talks was done. Negotiators who had been meeting for 2 days at the resort town's International Convention Center had shied away from pressing Israel and Hamas on a thorny question: how much territory in Gaza the Israeli military would leave before the hostage and prisoner exchange. They feared that getting into the details of the map could derail the talks altogether. This account is based on interviews with 15 officials from the US, Israel, and Arab governments involved in or briefed on the negotiation, all of whom insisted on anonymity to discuss private conversations and sensitive diplomacy. Both Israel and Hamas have taken massive positions. Hamas wanted Israel to pull out of Gaza entirely except for a narrow buffer zone along its border. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wanted Israeli troops to stay entrenched in some cities in Gaza to show his public and his hostile minister that he was making few concessions. Bridging that gap last Wednesday required steady American pressure on the lead Israeli negotiator, Ron Dermer. Officials said, as the Qatari premier note had urged, it also took chilly calls to the mediators from Trump himself, U.S. officials said. Dermer's official declined to comment. Hamas did not respond to requests for comment. Ultimately, the two sides more or less split the difference. Arab officers said Israel would hold on to much more territory than Hamas wanted to, but it would pull out of many built-up areas. Hamas gradually accepted the compromise. Arab and Israeli officials said the mediator also knew the that negotiating an agreement focused on the narrower issues of a ceasefire and hostage and prisoner exchange was more attainable than pushing for a grand deal that deal with difficult questions allow Israel full withdrawal from Gaza and Hamas disarmament. The success of Wednesday talks, where earlier attempts had failed, reflected how, once enough pressure had been applied, seemingly huge impediments could be overcome, or at least set aside for later. In the past, the two sides had fallen back off absolutes. Israel insisted on total victory and Hamas on a total Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. A big complaint for mediators about Israel in prior talks was that its negotiators never really had a mandate from Netanyahu to make a deal. This time, the leaders of both delegations, Kahi el-Hayar, the top Hamas negotiators, and Dermer, came with a mandate to reach a deal. Israel and Israeli officials said the talks were culmination of beginning weeks of diplomacy that began after the fallout over Israel Boucher Strait against Hamas officials meeting in Qatar. By late September, Trump had announced a 20-point plan that, while short on many details, specifically called for the release of all hostages in exchange for the Israeli pullback in Gaza. Crucially, on October 3, Trump closed to embrace Hamas' statement on his Gaza plan, even though it only offered support for part of his proposal, namely all exchange of hostages and prisoners. At the same time, he made clear that Israel would need to cooperate with his efforts to strike a deal or risk facing his arrest. By Wednesday afternoon, in Sharm el-Sheikh, mediators felt they were finally getting close as they shuttled between Israeli and Hamas delegations. Under pressure from Wikoff and Kunstler, Israel was showing more willingness to accept a middle ground on the withdrawal. The Israeli negotiators came across to thinking that while they would effectively be giving up control over half of Gaza, they could keep the other half to pressure Hamas to make more concessions in future talks about post-war governance. Israeli and Arab officials said el-Hayya, who had survived an Israeli assassination attempt weeks earlier in Doha, Qatar, said he needed to consult with other members of Hamas leadership, and convoy of black SUVs brought him and 3 other officials in the militant group back to their residence. Israel officials said the Hamas officials were gone for so long that Qatari Prime Minister instructed a top-eyed Abdul el-Sati to chase them down at their residence, officials said. El-Hayya was only ready to inform mediator of Hamas' decision at 10 p.m., 5 hours after they left the talks. By the time the Israeli, American, Turkey, Qatari, and Egyptian teams had already dispersed to their bidders other four seasons in Sharm el-Sheikh, a sprawling beachside resort. The Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani and the Egyptian intelligence chief Gan Hassan Rassar were sitting in Rashad's bidder when Al Hayya approached. Officials said Al Hayya told the mediator that even though Hamas considered the deal unfair, its priority was to stop Israel's bombings in Gaza. According to officials, Hamas, he said, still hoped the mediator would do everything they could to improve the deal for Palestinians. Though cloaked in dissatisfaction, Al Hayya's response was nevertheless clearly a yes. Some issues were still unresolved, including the names of Palestinian prisoners to be released by Israel. Mediator debated the merits of announcing the deal right away, but the mediator concluded that the outstanding issues was no deal breakers and said that Trump could issue a statement announcing an agreement. In Washington, Trump was hosting an event at White House when Secretary of State Marco Rubio passed him a note very close. The note read, "We need you to approve a true social pause soon, so you can announce the deal first." Egyptian officials sitting alongside an Israeli intelligence officers had finished making the final edits to the agreement's text. Al-Thani signed the agreement first before approaching Denmark with an English copy and separately Al Hayya with an Arabic one. Officials said at 1 a.m. one of the U.S. negotiators took a call from Trump and put him on speaker so the president could address the room. "It's a big day," the president said, and thank you for listening. Have a good day.